Welcome to the launch of the Book of Lists 2022. I'm Michael Curran from the Ottawa Business Journal. This launch is a big deal for us at Ottawa Business Journal. It's the completion and launch of a project that's actually quite monumental. It involves surveying hundreds of companies, compiling all of this data, wrapping all of this into a printed product and digital edition with lots of editorial context. So it's more than just lists. And it's a very sought after product. In fact, this is one of the most sought after directories and special publications that OBJ produces. And as we like to say, even in this age of Google, you can't access the same type of data as you'll find in the Book of Lists. So this is a virtual launch for the product. This fast-paced show will have several key elements. So we ask you to keep on watching. First off, we'll be revealing the top 5 companies in several different categories. That's coming up in just a minute. We also have 5 special guests speaking to today. We have experts, local business leaders speaking about recruitment, a really hot topic in 2022. Real estate, we'll be talking about co-working spaces, digital marketing tips, that's something on everyone's mind these days, and also the state of local main streets. So these, retail focused main streets throughout the city that have been ravaged to some degree by the pandemic. And we'll also speak with the sponsor of the 2022 Book of Lists. That's the Commissionaires Ottawa. They've had a very big year. They're now up to, listen to this, almost 5,000 local staff. And they've been making big headlines. They made a big acquisition in December. And they're also rolling out some new technology in the security space to round out their digital offerings. We'll be speaking with the CEO of Commissionaires Ottawa, Paul Guindon, in just a second. But listen, every big project needs a leader. And at Ottawa Business Journal, when it comes to the Book of Lists, that leader is Lisa Thibodeau. Let's recognize and welcome her now. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Well, this must be a load off your shoulders to get this project done, Lisa, because I mean, you spend months and months on this. But give us, and more importantly, our viewers a sense of what type of work goes into this.
Absolutely. For anyone unfamiliar with the Book of Lists, it's undoubtedly one of OBJ's most popular publications. Throughout the year, we always have people reaching out saying, when's the book? How can I get involved? And, that's just exciting to see the excitement in the community. We've been publishing the book for I think over 2 decades now. And it's really a culmination of countless hours of research resulting in this really great summary of some of the largest companies in Ottawa. People use it as a desk guide, a buying guide. I have last year's copy right here with me. And it provides, just a great snapshot of the various industries and sectors that we have in Ottawa.
I should show people the new copy too.
The new copy. Look at that. You're ahead of me.
This is what they're here to see.
Yeah.
So as you indicated, Lisa, you've interviewed, and your team interviewed 700 local companies. So certainly there must be a few things that stand out from doing that much research on the local economy and the companies that exist here. Tell
Absolutely.
us about those standout findings.
Yeah, for sure. This was actually a really interesting period for research. I found, like you mentioned, Mike, we had nearly 700 companies respond to our team's outreach. And, having been in this pandemic for coming up on 3 years, it was just nice to touch base with those local businesses. And it kind of gave us a real sense of just how people are faring in Ottawa, what sectors are growing, who's hiring. And, you hinted to it. We're going to talk a little bit about recruitment, but just the shifts in leadership that we've seen across the board in Ottawa. That was, just really interesting to kind of see how that was playing out across the city.
It is, so it's the changes on those lists, right? Unfortunately, you'd have to have the 2021 and 2022 to compare it. But, the change in local staffing, the change in leadership, these are all things that are always fluid. So, Lisa, the list component are a big part of the Book of Lists, but it's not the only component. Tell us about kind of what rounds out this project from an editorial perspective.
Definitely. I will highlight that we do have some cool new lists this year that people should definitely check out. There's in-home care providers, animation studios, but outside of that, as you mentioned, Mike, we have a great recap of Ottawa's hottest neighborhoods that are categorized by the price increases that we've seen across the board. We have fastest growing companies, we have 40 under 40, we have top federal contract vendors. There is so much information packed into the book of lists. There is definitely something for everyone. And just having worked on the project and being lucky enough to be involved in this for a few years now, like you said, Mike, it's so exciting to see how the lists change every year, but also how they don't change. There's some lists and some companies that have ranked at the top of these lists predating my OBJ days, and that in itself I think is just a pretty cool story to share.
Neat, very neat. Well, Lisa, thank you for all the work, months and months of work. You're kind of the big leader on this project. So thanks again for everything you do. Appreciate it. We'll see you soon.
Of course. Thank you.
And now, as promised, here is our first top 5 list revealed. On page 19 of this year's book of lists is a long-time list called the Executive Recruitment List. And in the number 1 spot on that list is Boyden. And I'm happy to be joined right now by the managing partner of Boyden in Ottawa. Here is Jim Harmon. Welcome, Jim.
Michael, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
It's great. I think HR, I'm sure you agree, Jim, is going to be one of the themes that all business leaders need to follow throughout 2022. I just want to start, though, by looking backwards a little bit. And in 2021, we heard this term called the Great Resignation. So I'm curious to ask you, Jim, did it happen in Ottawa, the Great Resignation?
I think it has happened, although in reality, it's something that's been in the works for a long time. And what it really is the fat part of the boomer resignation. And I think driven or accelerated by people simply saying, hey, I've had enough, or I've thought more about what's important to me in life as a consequence of the pandemic, and have kind of maybe advanced it by a year or two. But it isn't, I think it's great, but it's sort of this profound kind of cliff that the term infers. And the other aspect of it, I think, is there are a lot of organizations, a lot of the growth that we're seeing is around hires that are resulting from organizations that are top grading. So they're saying people in certain roles may not be strong enough to tackle the sorts of challenges that the pandemic's presented. So they're actually exiting some people that are closer to retirement. So in some ways, it's a voluntary resignation, and in some cases, I think organizations are encouraging it a bit in order to kind of top grade the talent that they have.
That's really interesting. I've thought that for a long time too. Just on your first point, is that it was a very personal decision. I think the pandemic has forced us all to reassess our lives, and part of our lives are our careers. And many people said, "I'm not happy, and I'm going to move on." But I hadn't heard that second point too, which is organizations looking to level up in terms of their leadership, and perhaps some people had to move on. Just turning our attention to 2022 for a second, Jim, as I indicated, I think HR is going to be a huge, huge issue. So given the fact that you've worked for literally decades in this executive recruitment and placed many of the CEOs and executives in our city, what tips would you give people in terms of attracting and retaining talent in 2022?
It's the, whatever inflation would have it at, the $64 billion question. I think it's a lot of the things that people have been thinking about for a long time, only exponentially. So the organizational brand, I think, is very, very critical. And by brand, I mean the hiring proposition, the culture, those sorts of things. So what does it mean to work at XYZ organization? And one of the things, and not to kind of jumble topics here, pandemic topics, but this whole issue of remote or in office, there's a lot of question marks around that, because for a lot of organizations, their premises, their office space is an aspect of culture. So I'll just inject that and answer your question, Michael. But also, I think compensation, we are in an inflationary sort of situation, and that extends to compensation as well. I mean, people have higher costs of living as a result of real estate costs and commodity costs. So comps going up. And I think that how people are creative in terms of compensation and the sorts of objectives and incentives that are being put in place and how they're tied to strategy is going to become that much more acute. So simply throwing cash at the problem isn't the only answer. But I do think the hiring brand and for marketing people that are already focused on that, I think they're ahead of the pack. Promoting your organization in thinking about talent is equal to, or maybe even more important than promoting your organization to your customers, because you can't serve one without the other.
It's excellent points again, Jim. I think you're right. Employer branding has existed, but now it's intensified. On the office space, I think there's a question about flexibility and culture there. And of course, it does come down sometimes to compensation, particularly in an inflationary economy where there's a labor shortage. So those are great tips, Jim. Thanks for being part of the Book a List launch. All the best in 22. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, Michael.
Once again, we have a great sponsor lined up behind the Book a List 2022. This is a company that's really on the move. They've made a big acquisition in December. That's the second acquisition, by the way, in just a few years. They're looking at rolling out new services, all in the security space. Right now, let's welcome the CEO of Commissionaires Ottawa. Here is Paul Guindon. Welcome, Paul.
How are you, Michael? Good day.
I'm doing very well. Thanks for joining us. Listen, I think 2022 is going to be an exciting year for Commissionaires Ottawa. In December, you made a major acquisition, a company called the ADGA Group, work in defense and security. Before that, ComNet. And also, you guys are always innovating in the security space. So tell us what is coming down the pipe, Paul, in 2022 when it comes to Commissionaires Ottawa.
Well, we want to make sure that Commissionaires is known as to be much, much more than security guarding. Guard services is part of our history. We're proud of our people. But for the past 18 years, our services have expanded and modernized in huge ways. Largest fingerprint infrastructures in Canada, online criminal background services, workplace investigation, threat risk assessment. And with these acquisitions in recent years, we can provide security system installation and integration, IoT and smart building installations, converged security, simulation and software solutions, operational fulfillment, and so much more. So we are offering a full spectrum of security solution. And when you work with one of us, you work with all of us.
I like that. When you work with one of us, you work with all of us. Paul, you've also taken lots of pride in the fact that you're a major employer. And now with the acquisition of ADGA, I believe your staffing contingent, this is a big, big number, is almost 5,000 people in Ottawa. Is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah, in Ottawa and north of Ontario as well. So yeah, about close to 4,000 at Commissionaires Ottawa, over 600 at ADGA, and about 150 at ComNet. So yes, we're one of the major players in town.
Yeah. And I think, your acquisitions, the new service offerings that are coming, you're really building out more of a total security solution. Security is going to become more and more important, isn't it, in 2022? I mean, it was always that way, but even more so today. Would you agree, Paul?
Oh, yes, it is. And when you hear about cyber security, cyber threat, you name it. I mean, yeah, the field of private security is huge. It is unfortunately needed, but for us, the unfortunate piece is a positive one. So yeah, we're here to help not only government, but commercial entities, companies, private sector in securing their information, their people, their facilities.
It's becoming more complex, and that's why people need a partner like Commissionaires Ottawa. and all the group of companies. Paul, I want to give you a big thank you. It's thanks to your support of the Book of Lists and our other advertisers that make all this research, this directory in both a printed format, digital, this launch. You guys help make all this possible, so we couldn't do it without you. So big thank you to you, Paul. Appreciate it.
Well, it's our pleasure, and we're very happy to be affiliated with the Book of Lists.
As we wrap up our interview, let's take a look at a video that summarizes what's happening with the Commissionaires Ottawa. Let's roll the video.
Commissionaires Ottawa has been expanding and modernizing our services in every respect. We acquired companies such as Adger Group so we can offer a full spectrum of security solutions. Our full spectrum of security solutions include everything from background screening and fingerprinting to cyber, electronic, physical, and personnel security solutions. We do it all. Work with one of us, this opens the door to work with all of us.
So the Book of List has over 20 pages devoted to commercial and residential real estate. And on page 33 is a list I think that's going to get a lot of attention. It's a list on co-working spaces. And these are becoming, as you might know, very popular. The number 2 spot on that list is occupied by an Ottawa-based company called TCC, that stands for the Corporate Center. And TCC has 82,000 square feet of co-working space spread throughout the city. And I'm pleased to be joined by its president right now. Here is the president of TCC, Sean Cochraine. Here he is. Hello, Sean.
Hey, Michael. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad that you joined us. So co-working space, I'm sure you agree, you guys have been making some big investments, and we're going to be talking about one of those big investments in a second, is a important trend in real estate. When you think about 2022, Sean, what do you think the commercial real estate sector will look like?
Well, let me get my crystal ball out. So, I mean, the real estate sector is a tough one to sort of crystal ball at this point with the sort of dragging pandemic. But truly and honestly, I expect there to be sort of a landslide of return to the office. Now, everybody is trying to figure out what that means. And I don't think we are going to be sliding back to our old normal and putting everybody back into their same desks. And that's where I think co-working and shared office space is really ready to sort of feed that need, which is more employee centric instead of corporate.
And you and your father were first movers, as I indicated. You guys have been part of co-working like quite literally for decades. In 2021, you made a big decision and kind of doubled down, if I can put it that way, in co-working space in Ottawa. And you subleased, I don't know if that's quite the right word, some space. You're sitting in it. So give us a little bit of sense of what this big decision you made related to the space you're sitting in right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when Shopify announced that they were going to be getting rid of their HQ here in Ottawa, very much one of the iconic office spaces of our city, it lit me up immediately. So I phoned them up and tried to figure out a way that we could make it work. And after months of chatting and figuring things out, we managed to make it work because they believed in this office space in a way that very few people do about their space. And you can feel it just being inside of it, how collaborative and alive the design and everything was to get this space to be what it was.
As its CEO famously said, the end of office centricity, I think is how he put it. That was quite the phrase. And I think it is great that Shopify subleased the space to a local company. I think that's really neat. But listen, talking about things that are really neat, Sean, we've got to talk about the room that you're sitting in, because that space was the former office of Tobias Lutke, the CEO of Shopify, and it has I'm going to call it a secret chamber. So stand up if you will, Sean, and go show us the secret chamber in the room. Aha! A hidden bookcase reveals a secret chamber. Tell us more about what that space is.
Yeah, so inside what would have been the CEO's former office was an escape room of sorts, where he could get away from the day to day and the busyness and do some yoga. So it has a nice natural light, but it's a nice little hidden compartment, something I have to admit as a child I would have lost my mind for. So
Yeah, I agree. It was all when I was a kid. It was all about secret forts. So maybe Toby was the same. But that's yeah, we showed it, and of course we're chuckling about it. But it does kind of exemplify the uniqueness of the space you're occupying there, the former Shopify space, right? I mean, it's full of kind of interesting nooks and crannies like that.
it's the type of space that any organization would sort of dream to be able to have access to. And now, as a co-working operator, we can open it up and allow any business to come in and utilize it, whether it be for an hour, a day, a month, whatever they need. And they can really feel alive in this office. And I think this is the type of space that people are going to be looking for in the future once we get through this.
Well, thank you, Sean. We'll be following the progress of TCC, the big player locally headquartered in co-working spaces. All the best to you and your father and the bigger team at TCC in 2022. Sean, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.
Before our next interview on digital marketing tips for 2022, we have another special video for you. Earlier in the show, Paul Guindon from Commissionaires Ottawa spoke about a major acquisition that happened in December. That company, very well known in private and public sector security, is called the ADGA Group. Let's learn more about this big acquisition.
At ADGA Group, we offer converged security, simulation, and software solutions, as well as operational fulfillment. We power and protect our customers' most critical and sensitive work. Once we evaluate our clients' needs, we can then deploy technical and business experts to design, build, operate, and/or maintain those same systems. Our clients are primarily government bodies and private sector firms that are generally focused on security and defense issues. Our clients do include Canada's military, its police forces, government agencies at all levels, and private sector firms.
The third section in the Book of Lists 2022 is devoted to technology companies. And on page 53 of the book, we have a list of digital strategy and custom web development companies. And on that list is a company that's been doing this type of business for many years. In fact, it's celebrating its 20th anniversary. Here is the CEO of Fenix, Jennifer MacKinnon. Hello, Jen.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for joining us.
Oh,
Jen, I think you would easily agree that during this pandemic, we've seen like a digital fast forward into the future, and all companies need to think about what they're doing online in terms of their presence and marketing. So I thought, Jen, you might be able to share some of your tips for 2022 as people want to rethink their digital marketing and have a stronger presence. What would you say to these people?
Well, you're absolutely right. COVID did force all businesses to, I'm going to say the words, pivot and adapt very, very quickly. So, everybody's hands were forced in order to literally stay in business. But it did accelerate the adoption of technology where businesses tend to move a lot slower. But now that we're 2 years into the COVID pandemic, businesses need to level up. They need to not only just be online selling their products and services, but there's a lot more to consider. So now that we're 2 years in, we've realized that automation is no longer optional. If you want to survive in the future and future-proof your business, you have to figure out some way to offer your business online. And we saw so many businesses, even here in Ottawa, that offered their restaurants, opened up online ordering and takeout mechanisms online. We had health services online, which was unheard of in that industry. So we did see some disruption as well. But what's important in that is that 2 years ago, getting online and being able to conduct business was important. But now users are expecting an experience. So it's no longer just good enough to have a clunky checkout login, registration system, people are expecting sophistication. So, they want to have personalization. They want to have a smooth online process. They want to be integrated into the other tools and technologies that you use without any interruption to them. They want the company to be able to make recommendations based on their past preferences. They want loyalty programs and ease of use. So getting online was step one. Step two now is making sure that you're offering an elevated user experience.
And there's a level of sophistication there, so if I think back to like the late 1990s, it was like have that brochure type website. And then maybe in the 2000s, we adopted social media and a few things. But I hear what you're saying, Jen, that this is an evolution now. Like, often people use the word digital maturity, right? This needs to be about a level of customization and automation. And that's a key component of these businesses.
Yeah, 100%. So a good example would be, perhaps a training company would have put their ability to register and pay for training online 2 years ago. And that might have been a significant innovation for them because perhaps it was done manually prior. But 2 years in now, they have to start looking at other opportunities within their business that they could continue to innovate and continue to future-proof because the workforce has changed. So no longer is it good enough just to allow people to register and pay online, but perhaps you should look at offering your training services online. Maybe you engage with an LMS service or virtual on demand. And it keeps businesses relevant, these kinds of adoptions of technologies, by looking at opportunities in your existing business structure to automate. Because now you don't have to have in-person inside a hotel room, rent a room, have 20 people in the room. If you can put your learning online, as an example, then you can offer it 24/7 anywhere in the world. So, that first step was good, but don't leave it there. Continue to look at ways to innovate within your own business.
I like that example about the learning company because, again, I'm following you that 2 years ago, maybe it was, here's our online learning library. Here's how you register. And then you're likely going to go to a physical place, to get that training. But now, if you're thinking about a more sophisticated approach, it could be, here's the online category. Here's how you pay for the course. And now we're delivering it, maybe even video on demand or something like that. And it almost reminds me, Jen, of this concept of frictionless commerce, right? Like your website is actually doing business for you 24 hours a day.
Yeah, and isn't that the point? So that you don't have to, you don't have to be there to make the money happen. It can happen literally 24/7 from anywhere in the world. You can expand your global reach, all those kinds of, and then you don't have to actually work to deliver those services. You've automated that process, and you can deliver it to more people. So that's actually one of the biggest things that happened during COVID was the speed of adoption was accelerated by light years. And what's interesting in that is that business leaders didn't necessarily manifest the change. Necessity manifested the change. It wasn't that the management team sat down and decided that this was necessary. And so I would expect that moving forward, businesses should expect that the pace of change will continue. And the early and quick adoption of new trends and technologies is going to be required. I think the pandemic has set people up to expect these experiences online, and they'll go to businesses that offer them.
In a sense, we just talked about it's your 20th anniversary, so founded in 2001, Jen. It's almost the realization of the .com boom finally, right? Like there was a little bit of a misstep there, or perhaps we just needed to be patient and wait for 20 years to get to this point where companies' websites again would actually be doing business for them. So it's so neat to arrive at this point. And of course, Fenix is one of the companies that can help you do that. Jen, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Best of luck in 2022.
My pleasure.
So I think the pandemic has brought both hardship and appreciation in many cases. And when I think of Ottawa's main streets, I think both of those are reflected there. So there's been hardship on the part of local business owners, and there's been appreciation in the general public as to what these main streets mean in terms of our quality of life. Of course, they're populated by bakeries and restaurants and tailors and and also professional services, all sorts of great shops that make our neighborhoods really vibrant. On page 72 of the Book of Lists is an entire page dedicated to something called business improvement areas. And these are formally organized main streets. And we're pleased to be joined right now by the executive director of OCOBIA, which is a coalition of these BIAs. Here is Michelle Groulx. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks for having me. Welcome.
You've had quite the run over the past almost 2 years, Michelle, and I mean BIAs in general, and probably you personally. It's been such a tough time for main streets, but tell us, what has been happening to main streets in 2021, for example?
Well, it's no secret that main streets have been hit pretty hard by the pandemic and the public health measures that have taken place. But at the same time, we've seen resiliency of the main street businesses that like nothing else. And, businesses have been, reinventing themselves and adapting to everything that's been going on, the major ups and downs over the past 2 years.
And I don't want to be, we're going to talk more optimistically in just a second here. And I don't want to be doom and gloom, Michelle, but when I do drive by some of the main streets or drive on some of the main streets, I do see some closures. That is probably a harsh reality of the pandemic.
It certainly is the harsh reality, and you'll see that some businesses have not been able to weather the storm when you see revenues completely being cut and then debt accumulation. It has certainly impacted the street view of the main streets and the businesses in there.
Again, a bit more optimistically now, I know you and the provincial government, groups like Invest Ottawa, for example, have rolled out programs and support. I'm thinking of Digital Main Street just as an example, which is, an effort to help businesses improve their digital online presence. Shopify is a great example where we have a flagship company right here. But tell us a little bit about, as we look to 2022 and perhaps beyond, Michelle, how do you see main streets and the businesses that are comprised on them? How do you see them evolving?
What's happened this pandemic is what some people have called the Main Street pilot in effect. And so we've seen many businesses turn to online business, so e-commerce and social media, and engaging with their customers even on a more broader scale than they had before. So basically, they're doing whatever they can to serve their community and to serve customers. And I see that happening in the future, and especially in 2022, in that adaptability to be able to move beyond the bricks and mortar that they're in to do some outreach and to generate revenue.
And I just want to get your sense of the composition of Main Street. So, in talking here, I just referred to, the bakeries and the coffee shops and the restaurants and the hairstylists and all of those kind of retail and professional service space. But if we look to the Main Street of the future, is there going to be a little bit more of a mix of, ground floor retail, second floor, more commercial office space, and then residential? Is that inevitably where we're going here?
I think so. What we're going to see is I hope to continue to see independent businesses flow in our streets, but we are going to see things like more chain retailers and more larger scale businesses come to main streets, which is fine when you're looking at a delicate balance between independent and larger scale. It is about affordability, but also we're looking at the possibility of the kind of second floor offices and the when you're thinking of moving up, it might be more of a mix between residential and commercial in order to service what Ottawa has, which is the 15 minutes strategy, and for businesses and main streets to be able to service communities in their neighborhoods better.
That's an interesting point, Michelle, like a mashup of both residential and commercial for sure. Michelle, thanks for joining us, but more importantly, thanks for everything you've been doing for the past many months and years to keep our main streets vibrant. Thanks very much, Michelle.
Thank you so much.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. It's been a great show, an exciting launch for the Book a List 2022. A big thanks to all of our special guests, and especially a thanks to the Commissionaires Ottawa, this year's sponsor of the Book a List 2022. So wait a second. Before you go, though, there's a big thing we haven't dealt with. How do you get a copy? I know that you're hanging on still in this broadcast going, how do I get one? Okay, so here's what you do. It's very easy. Go to www.obj.ca/BOL. BOL, of course, stands for Book of Lists. www.obj.ca/BOL. On that page, you can click and then order a copy to get mailed to you. We know a lot of you are anxious. In fact, we've had all sorts of emails coming in. When do I get my copy? When do I get my copy? So that's the best way to get your copy. And as we sign off, let's recognize the larger team that has made the Book a List 2022 possible. And we'll take a look at this year's advertisers. Thanks very much for watching. Hope to see you real soon. Bye-bye.